your videos. If that is possible. Yes, please turn on your videos. Because this is the first class and I would like to see your faces. Yes, thank you. Yes, some of you may know me, some of you may not know me. I am Miss Didiki and I will be your class teacher for this session, that is for the 5th and the 6th semester. And I think it would be good if we can have some kind of or a little time for interaction before we start with the class. I don't know how many of you are, as per the attendance sheet, there are 47 students, but right now there are only 38, including myself, 39. So I don't know when your classmates will join, or maybe some internet connection problem is there. So for those of you who are here in this room, I'm assuming that you have all done your admission, right? Are you all done with your admissions? Is there anyone who is facing any problems for getting admitted or regarding admission? Any money admission lak tur chung changa har satna emo enge money ro khol na nei kha chani ke ma pom lo shilula na se admission team ti deu vet to ang tro, right?
Miss,
Yes. Ketia. Oh.
internet banking engma ka khoi velo bang khan principal ka silamo
Oh. And what did he
ka
say?
ka kalau chinchia atia.
Oh, okay. Anyone else besides Tuna Inflation? You point, you can always text me or message me. Because admission tizat ka ishat veng na yawang kan attendance sheet da hitchanin 47 ka kola hitchanin kan oma.
Miss kay po ka kan na ti thailok lawa
Oh,
lockdown
that.
vel ka bang khan chan thaila bang khan.
Okay. So online ka har sadna omdeu wangin ti na mi online kal tanga ti ka.
Oh yes miss
Okay.
baka connection ka chalawa mo.
Mm.
Chuan power supply ve kan nei chalaw bang khan ati thailo top ri a.
Okay. Noted. Anyone else? Okay. All right, before we begin with the class, there is one important announcement which I would like to make, that is regarding the election of the class representative, CR Thamchungchang Akhanin. It has come to my notice that class CR Thamkha Aranglama Neikha, principal Lama Pokhan, principal Atang Pokhanin, Yendale. Request kamika oma chuanin came upon kaloril shima. So what we will do is Monday came up period first class kakane DPC drafting and pleading and conveyancing kamis class akanin first class akanin we will have CR election through Google form. Chuanin chumi tan CR nominate tan kanin engeni nominate do in ne chuanin you can message me WhatsApp emo khan in ron soyanga CR le assistant CR to kha nomination kha ati theya chuanin nomination lo lu dana zirin election kha kan lenga I nomination na kha entina mi mishing ning CR to pakhat le assistant CR to pakhat zo ni chon election nei boy po kha ngai lo thei tho ama chu nomination lo lu nem dewani chuanin Google form khanin CR election kha kan ti ve thapang on offline in tia class in huwa offline na than kha arem chang in a thei si lawa so CR election na kha chu Google form mang khang kan tinga sanin vo ini kani hu ma sak berani offline ten hani mu theila live nge in mo classroom environment kami atmosphere te ka han thei se chu kan ti vekanga ama ero chu kan bo ro akin zer lawa tianga online na kan ti shi hi angai dona chata chani nang mani lamatang le ke malamatang point thei top so in hemi interpretation of statutes the subject hi in zirtira in shilfia in explainer so if ya kan tum dona engamo akar laka har sada nei kha chuanin ta classmate te amo va zot boy amo teacher dang te dei mo va ti boy lawa a concern teacher at zel khen kha kan tum thin don le problem kan nei ni pon eng ko nga po chuanin chu lo chu drafting pleading and conveyancing kha subject kha omboka drafting kha chuta chuanin keima le sar pate khang kan la dona kan in sentel to a keima hian interpretation of statute hi a full and a subject hi kala dona chon drafting pleading and conveyancing kham ya kha sar pate nen khanin kan in sema sar pate khanin na sha ti to chewen alak tu chin a portion kha as he informed
Miss
okay chuanin syllabus in kol kha chuanin sar pate lak lo chin zong kha keima na kalak tu chu ni a if you want to note down kami chungchanga kha chuanin in drafting pleading and conveyancing that is clinical 3 kha course content kha kan en chuanin drafting pleading and conveyancing a oma a le b general principles of drafting a oma chuan pleadings a ombok ta a kami hnuaiah khan roman number 1 civil ti kha omani tro civil hnuaiah khan you have plain written statement kan ti te affidavit khang zong zong kha civil hnuaiah mi zong kha keima portion ani dona chuanin number 2 roman number 2 a criminal portion zong kha sar pate na la le dona civil portion kha keima nianga sar pate a will deal with the criminal portion and roman number 3 a conveyance tia khan a atanga sub number a atanga j k thenga omta a to k thenga omta a conveyance number 3 a A to E kha ke mang ka le dona ni mo A B C D E kha ke mang ka le dona meaning civil le A B C D E with general principles of drafting le pleading kha I danglam na tam ta ko lawa civil drafting emo pleading kan ti chuanin civil noi mi jong ka pleading chu ni mai ta a mo e kil har sa lawa kan in shil fianga practical ti te angai dona sale agreement sale di ti chawo ka ke mang ka don boka besides that khami ka portion ka lak tu le sar pate na portion la lak tu kan an soi fia pia lama khan inge mo har satna DPCB ka drafting b ka har satna chuanin sar pate le ke ma kha min consult the reng ani ka share tu ani chu chuanin any question regarding the election of the CR and tinge inge mo soi du te name this being the first class inge mo interaction te thil soi du na hun te han nei te kha tha in ka sia a voi khat in mu na kan voi khat mit na ni na angin mo anyone who wants to share something in omlem lo mi
Miss
yes bena
hello ni china karon hello isoi nomination CR chungchang khamo
oh
hello SBC lito bangkhanin mor melo se tiam lok mis
yes yes
chang se de ka
mm.
hello nomination tura khanin ke mani ang khachu kan ni
oh
the to don si lo kha ha karo sei ve do
oh
ya
on
kha
e kha kha I kan lo sha chi kanga he bena hirin om takin in class CR kha ani chau chal chal bayin ka lo sha a na mani class nen hen chu te nga ke ma hi entinge ka ti ang class han lak pu pang kha kan la nei lo wang khanin I ka familiar lu tuk lo ma chu tun 5th le 6th semester a hi chanin kan in inge ni shon chho thatakin mumal takin fel fai takin kan in shon chho tur angai la nya bena kha kan sha he SBC member ten lo ni a OB SBC a kha kha chanin class CR le na han la ko pakha an tang kha chanin kem khan le khazir pia lama academic and studies pia lama khang extracurricular activities tam lu tu kha an tang kha na bon kha le te kha nomination in don file a file tu khan in don file huna khan in lo share sak don ti kha aron soina ani mai aba zong kha chu SBC ni lem lo te kha chu theirek tur angai la CR ni hi phurit angala na lai chen te hi om ve a classmates pa ngai te den chon ni ete min adang dewa mai ro chu engma har sanna thil har sa lu tu khan ti tu kha amlo class pum pui ai o tu ti khani de ma ya mo abak zong kha chu kan ti thei tur angai la te ro อันนี้จู SBC เต้นนี้นางอาคารกันเช็ดแถมตัวละไงล่ะโอเคเอ็งว่าใส่ดูดังนี้อมตัวเล่มแล้วส่วนนี้interpretation of statutes and principles of legislation ที่อันนี้กัน subject ที่ LLB 5.4.1 ที่อันนี้ course content กันเอ็นขั้นนี้unit 5 เครื่องออกมา unit 1นะคันนี้ general and rules of statutory interpretation rules of interpretation ช่าง primary rule กันที่เต mischief rule golden rule กันที่อันที่เขาเท่ากันใส่เท่าโดนะส่วนนี้ให้มี interpretation of statute กันที่หันที่หันเอ็นเรื่องว่าที่ส่วนนี้อาหารเมลนี่โม่technical อาหารเมลนี่ไม่รู้จู constitution ที่เนี่ยหันอะไรอินกุ้งไก่เท่านั่นไล่ตั้มตะข้าออกมากัน syllabus กันเอ็นพวกคันนี้ค่ะ preamble heading title กันที่เต age of interpretation กันที่ presumption กันที่อันที่สองกับ constitution เนี่ยหันตั้งลำเนี่ยที่ตั้งก็ถูกแล้วไอ้อ่างจูนี่เนี่ยช่วงแล้วว่าไม่รู้จูอะไร in relate อินจูเท่าที่ค่ะอันนี้ interpretation of statutes กันที่เฮียนินมิ่งsubject มิ่งจังพวกเฮียนะหาเรื่องเนี่ยที่เรื่องจู interpret แต่ฮี interpret ไม่ที่จูอะไรไม่จู rules ช่างข้าเวนี่หัน interpret นั่นตัว begin when it comes to laws and statutes จูให้มี subject ที่น่ะไอ้เนี่ยนี่อี code ที่น่ะตรงกับมันลงมันบีกแต่โม่คุยจังเนี่ยอัน infer ก็เตียงจงค่ะโม่ก็ตรงเสียแต่ให้เรามี
Arlo en trong điều khác khác
kan system azir te pode ba itani kan ta chon afiat te dia kan ta dena zoi do ni
enge zia le tu anh tiếng nghe cái tiếng ở trên ta nó rồi trên ta nó zia chú cái ta tị thế vang về mình đang cái đàn sấy tôi có in sẽ thấy em sẽ
Miss azoi dewa
rồi đâu trên nào
Miss Kema ni a chuan a fia tha lutuk.
earphone kan manga earphone mang ka chuan in a fia deuh niang
earphone man khan o zyada ma se azoi
rồi ta na ring đâu cái trong khan na ring ta khan na lâu nhìn đom về để thấy xia vẫn har về đó
miss ti khan zyada
zia mà anh po ni sila kan chan photanga unit 1 ti le ma te ma engeni introductory deu ania ti mayang vo in class hi chu enge statute chu ni a enge interpretation enga tinge statute hi interpret anga ina chan mo khatyang jong kha kan soidona tuna hianin screen karon share anga ppt in mu thei ve kem PPT karon share hi in mu thei chuanin tu moni ber kha min lo chang sela
Mutemis.
Interpretation of statutes kan ti chuan voina chuanin meaning of statute omzia enge chuanin enge classification kan soyanga kan soi thei chin hi kan soyang chuanin interpretation meaning chu enge omzia enge atang kaina enge purpose chuanin statute kan ti hianin enge ni it is a written law passed by a legislative body in a law and pass written zia ka da kha statute ti chu ni mai ta omzia sang hin ya zia tu sang hin lekha bu sang ate article le journal sang ate post statute omzia hi mi sang in an zia khain ang lo ve ni ama ero chu atlang pui a khai khom na chuan statute kan ti hi it is an enactment of a legislative body which is expressed in a formal document mumal le fel fai takpa ngai takania chu act of parliament kan ti hi statute kha kan ti chu ni tani in legislative body in a siama a enacta which is then expressed in a formal document mumal le verify le pa nga ya tak mo chu act of parliament ti kha lo ni ta a chu ti ni chuanin statute hi enge it is a formal written enactment to then legislative authority legislative bodies then an enact kha mo a country legislative body a ram pakhat legislative authority le legislative body then an enact formal written enactment of a statute chu ni ta a charin he tongkam statute ti tongkam hi it is often used to distinguish law made by legislative bodies from the judicial decisions judiciary ina judge ten na judicial lama an decisions siam ten en khan engeni omzia kha adanglam ve ni achan chu legislative body ina enact khan ita statute chu he ta judge ten an decision te amo law an lo interpret an lo propound te kha chu statute la ka khana dangle ni statute mang ve khare interpret thin ta zo kani mo judiciary lama chan judicial action lama chuanin statute hi it is the will of the legislature which is conveyed in the form of a text legislature ina adu dan atha ati angte asiama kha statute anita a chuba ka chuanin statute hianin it sets forth general propositions of law that courts apply to specific situation courtin an situation machon azira anlo apply shang kha various propositions angchi dan manga decision an lo siam te khang song kha statute hianin aron engeni statute ina pe tinani chu mo court in judge na thila lo interpret do chuanin heta statute amo law amo khami dan mang khana so interpret china ka statute changkai na le apoi mo na chuni tani chuanin statute chu engkia lo omnge kan ti chuanin yes okay is it moving now okay let's do one thing Eldrinami yes let's do one thing ka explain nga ka so nga slide hi chu kan la in pe thei tu ra nga yang ti han verbal ka explanation hi mi zong na invite na mi slide kha achelo mi nang ma ni zong in screen na
yes miss cái map on the channel
hold on let me try again
yes miss Pitya
tikhan enge an is it moving now
yes miss
click chop ma yang okay yes chuanin statute hi chu engtia lo omnge kan shanga dan re reng chu first it is introduction of the bill om china through houses of parliament and more house then introduced china chuanin statute po it begins as a bill proposed or sponsored by legislator ina bill ron propose a statute on internal nita chuanin if the bill survives the legislative committee process and is approved by both houses of the legislature chuanin house pani ten lo approve ani chuanin the bill becomes a law when it is signed by the executive officer that is the president amo state ani khachuan governor khani mai ta chu statute lo pian chwa dana ron ni dana khani ta chuanin bill re nga hi voile khata dan hi om top lo ta it is bill ani vek photta ni bill and introduce chuanin bill khadan lo ni han when a bill becomes a law the various provisions in the bill are called statute provisions shang kha bill noi akhan om thin ta khan provision shang kha statute ti chu ni ta mo he term statute hianin it signifies the elevation of a bill from legislative proposal to law legislature ina proposal anei atanga dana ron ni na khami a stage kha elevation mo aron kaisa na aron kailon chona akha statute ti tongkam po hian soifia thawani chuanin statute hianin it may forbid a certain act more direct a certain act make a declaration or set forth governmental mechanisms to aid society hemi particular point b key engeni statute kan ti hianin classification of statute shang omta you have prohibitory statute kan ti te mandatory statute kan ti te oma directory statute kan ti te mo codifying statute consolidating statute kan ti te po khang shang kha oma so ta chuanin thil ti tura ava direct na te mo thil engemoni act ti lo tura avati na te po mo prohibitory te mandatory ka tiang sang kha umta a so that the statute kind of forbid theya a forbid tua khan it may also permit to the doing of a certain act mo chuanin constitution kan shia a constitution a hi chuanin it does not use the term statute amar to law hemi term hi mang thung ta a law kan ti chuan enge it includes ordinance bylaw kan ti the rules regulations customs article 13 a khana om kha mo chuanin statute hi it is the will of the legislature and Indian statute is an act of the central or state legislature statute kan ti chuanin India a chuanin hemi parliament amo central in amo state legislature in amo dana pass hawaka those acts ka statute ti khalonita a mo chuanin statutes generally refer to the laws and regulations of very sort every provision of law which permits or prohibits anything ti kha click to blazer meyang Are we still following? So now coming to the classification of statute. Statute and classified and it's in kanin kasoi to a heta hianin ka notes pakhat siam hi ka en look ka refer look ngaya hini soi pa hianin kan refer chawanga yes statute hi chu classification sang kha omta depending upon the duration enti ka changa enti khun chung nge kha statute kha it will it operate a operation hun chung te nature of operation a object and extent of application khang mang zong khani statute kan classify chinani chuanin a omrei tur hun chung a duration on the basis of duration a chuanin perpetual statutes temporary statute te oma prospective statute te nature of operation a chuan prospective te retrospective which would be applied only to the future prospective more retrospective to relates to the past kan ti te directory statute kan ti te directing the doing of a certain act more mandatory statute kan ti ang chi te kha khangkha on the basis an nature of operation te le an application te an duration khatia mil khan statute kha asang nan classify ani chuanin and with reference to the objective statutes are classified as enabling statute kan ti te disabling permissive prohibitory codifying kan ti te codifying statutes kan ti hi chuanin it relates to the statutes which it provides a detailed authoritative statement more CPC kan ti te civil procedure code te Hindu marriage act kan ti te codifying statute more then coming to the consolidating statute kan ti chuanin it represents the whole body of the statutory law on the subject more to that chuanin arbitration and conciliation act kan ti te khang zong kha repealing statute amending statute te repealing kan ti chuanin engeni dan to sa ron thak na a repeal more which repeals the statute which already exists kan ti ang chi kha khangka classification engeni based on classification of statutes based on the nature of operation objective kan ti te hi chu like I said tuna kan class tuna kan soi hi engeni inril ru engeni avan hardon ve avan tamti ang zong khan lo ngai to alo ula so yang khanin statute chu enge interpretation chu enge ti kan sha thiam theinan meya ron soi khanita amme na chuanin engting nge statute hi an interpret eng rules tenge an man mo what are the external aids what are the internal aids because you kan da soi chodon chu so in lo lungai ma lu tu ka nge now kaka statute chungchanga chuanin nita sela classification omjia te statute chu it is the will of the legislature mo bill angin ron introduce pota bill in ron introduce pota then if it is passed by both the houses of the legislature then it is sent to the president or the governor of the state for his assent then it becomes a law act of parliament kan ti the central state legislatures anga hi statute chu ni mai ta mo Indian penal code te po kan ni tero that is a statute now coming to the term coming to the meaning necessity and the purpose of interpretation kan ti chuan enge interpretation han ti hi chuan mi in engeni kalo interpret vedan chuan kan ti chuan kalo shia thiam vedan kalo nga i vedan anga chuan ti nite po akoka mo layman basic understanding a chuanin when we say interpretation it means the art of finding out the true sense of an enactment by giving the words of the enactment their natural and ordinary meaning kha enactment kha statute ta khan enge soyatum enge atum tak enge shilfi atum zuk mu chwana the art of finding out the true sense of an enactment mo to ta chanin engtikong in nge zuk shal fi antumang by giving the words of the enactment their natural and ordinary meaning mo unnatural ordinary meaning zuk sha tumna zupe chunga enge ni kha enactment khan enge atum tak zuk mu chwana kha interpretation mo it is the process of ascertaining the true meaning of the words used in a statute antong kam manate a omzedik tak zuk sha tumna kami process kha interpretation ti chunita a chuanin the object of interpretation of a statute is to determine any object. What is the object of interpretation? It is to determine the intention of the legislature, which is conveyed expressly or impliedly in the language used. Statute it is a formal document which is enacted by the will of the legislature. Legislature what is the intention of the legislature by passing the law? What is the intention behind the passing of the law? What is the intention of the legislature? To determine the intention of the legislature, which is conveyed expressly or impliedly in the language used. Statute antong kamman atanga engeni legislature na asoy tum zukshat intention zukshat tum tepoka. That is the object and the purpose of interpretation. So in interpretation, he defines interpretation as the process by which the courts seek to ascertain the meaning of legislation through the medium of the authoritative form in which it is expressed. Court in any legislature na athil soy omzia zukshat swatumna kamiyaka salmona chuan interpretation define to anita ani. Now hemi interpretation kanti term it is derived from the Latin term interpretari, which means explain or to understand or to translate. So interpretation kanti to Latin term atanga derive ania interpretari to ta chuanin, which means zuk soifia emo zuk sha thiam tum emo kha interpretation omzia chu nitani. Then engatinge interpretation hi enge atuna enge chang why do we need to interpret? Legislature in dana siama engatinge khata legislature in anmani du dan angte anmani will angten danan siama engatinge interpret atuna more why there is a need for interpretation. Number one, necessity of interpretation would arise only where the language of the statutory provision is ambiguous, not clear, or where two views are possible, or where the provision gives a different meaning defeating the object of the statute. Heta atak yan engatinge interpretation to a true na kanti chuanin so yang kan statute to legislature na adu anga asyam mo it is enacted by the will of the legislature kanti to hakata atak kanin engeni court ate thu boy local tani mo chumi act mang chuanin chumi chu chinfel turani ti aloni a tongkam sang kha lo mang tani the language using the statute. So that's why kang a provision, statutory provision ka sometimes they may be ambiguous, they may be not clear, or interpretation omzepani nei te pokalo mi theni. A statute andon siam chuana aron pian chuana object zukti chevek khop khanin omzia kha two or more views te pokha omtheni chu wang chuanin interpret kha ngai thina chuta an interpret dan mang sang chu mo kong sang chu when two or more views are possible. Mo ngai dan chihni emo omzia chihni item omthei angchia interpret dan chu kan la soi chhodo na amar chu boina chuanin khang kha interpret angai na chan interpretation angai na chana kha kan soi photani on. If the language is clear and unambiguous, no need of interpretation would arise. Interpretation interpret nge to interpretation hi nge to ni ti kha chuang lawa only when the language is not clear and ambiguous. Mo at fia alo at siang tok lawani the ani so can and interpret chinta. Otherwise, if the language is clear and unambiguous, then there is no question of interpretation. So, interpretation of something means ascertaining, finding out the meaning or significance of that thing. More or ascertaining an explanation of something that is not immediately obvious. Chiang hal kwat ni lo ang chi te alo om khanin interpret a omzia zuksha tumna chang khanin a object te kharon chok the chinani. More so interpretation of statute kanti hianin it is required for two basic reasons. More interpretation of statute is required for two basic reasons. That is, to ascertain the legislative language. Legislature na atong kampana teka, it may be complicated for a layman. Mo kay maani te chu hei law background lo nei te lo zil sil to te kan ni a tongkam eng mo ni hria thiam le hria te ka chu kan lo nei te ma se for a layman, for a common man, it may be difficult to understand the language used by the legislature. Hence, therefore, it requires interpretation. Legislature na intention ha kan zu shefek thelo ni dan siam lai nan dan siam na kan om ve box silova antong kampante. The language and the provisions in the statute cannot be understood, or it may be complicated for a layman and hence may require interpretation. But once again, if the language is clear and unambiguous, then there is no need for interpretation. So engatinge interpretation of statute hi angai na chan kan ti chona second reason the intention of the legislature, to find out the intention of the legislature or the legislative intent. Heta statute and provision and language man shang kha rules shang maning golden rule kan ti te, harmonious construction kan ti te, mischief rule kan ti zong khang mang te khan anzuk interpret china chu te tang chuanin legislature na atum akha azuk shia the china li chu wan chuanin these are the two basic reasons why interpretation of statutes is required. And any a purpose to statute kan shetoa interpretation kan share interpretation angai le atul na chan te kan sheto boka ani chuanin what is the purpose of interpretation of statute? It is to help the judge to ascertain the intention of the legislature. Judge in legislature the intention azuk shiat fiat theina tur azuk shiat chwa theina tur atana lo pui tu changkai tak ani thaya interpretation of statute si mo, but not to control that intention or to confine it within the limits which the judge may deem reasonable or expedient. Hatana poi mo atsu interpretation of statutes. The purpose of interpretation of statute is to help the judge so that he can find out the true meaning or the true intention of the legislature, but he is not to control that intention. Kami legislature na intention na isa danaron siyam chwa chan mo behind the making of the proposal of the bill. Kanga intentions of control to mo amadu dan ang wheels and whims ang zonga mo amadu dan ang zonga lo herkoy lam nilawin only to ascertain the intention of the legislature, but not to control or modify the intention. So to interpretation of statutes purpose atum poi mo tak chu ani yes. Before I further continue, kaka vo inbi katana introductory interpretation of the statute of the introductory kan soi thei chu ni a. That is all I have prepared for today's class. Chuanin kan share tur chu ihan online class kan kal chawanga a thei chin a PPT te kan siam chhozel dona khang kha kan PPT siam te po kha class ate po kan pe chong thei tur angai la mo problem om lo tur angai la in pe chon da na khanin tuna kan han explain le kan han soi tak interpretation te le statute chung changa khanin like I have said introductory chu ani a more outline, a blueprint angani chu amar chu the real thing and interpret what are the methods used, what are the techniques used ta khachu kan soi chozel dona unit wise anga kan chhuna te po so anin that is all for today. But yes 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 very good question. Interpretation of statute 5th semester a kan zera nikuma sa te po khanin nikuma po khanin student khanin nin ron approach ama chuanin fifth semester kan zira te khan kan zir chho nok no ka kan thei to kin I interpretation ni chu material hi tamwak lo ni timayang mo chu ta chuanin enge ni ama kha chan kan zir chho nok no ka library le khabu ang te tun corona ma de covid ma de ni chu ka soi class library offline in kan han tin nok no ka ti khan hemi question ron raise hi an mangai lo ni kuma khanin pakhat hian ron raise a ma'am enga tinge hi tuna chu kan zir because statute kan ti chuan constitutional law te telvek sia hey a root ani sia enga tinge tuna chu kan zir ti ka question ania hi chu elrin chan a har ka ti tuna ri mai chona chan chu I tuna te po ke chuanin syllabus committee ten oma mo syllabus luang tu ten oma khata khanin interpretation hi ma se ke mani kan LLB zir ve lai po khanin a semester problem a chawani kan zir ni hi chu ka shathiam chelo LLB kalmang enge ni don chu ka shelo mo kata khanin question chata kan yama ro chu I atir lama hanjir thei kha chu ni se nakina law course kan zir chho tura kha chu min pui theina lai chu atamin ka share game po hian mom amar chu tuna po intan law sani chuang lo bania 5th semester in oma 16 ni chonga in practice huna khana la changkai don intan kha chan gains vek thawania khati zong khan ngai tua thiam mayang yes chuan one more thing hetiang enge ni katiang subject related ni lo mo course related ni lo dewa po as a class teacher enge mo har sadna in nei chuanin ron soi she lo turani mo approachable dewa thei te kha acha ama ero chu class le hemi subject le course concern kha chu nga sa ni ta khami pya lama enge mo har sadna nei kha chuanin he ta classmates te mo students dang te emo teacher dang dei te emo timayang in concern lu tuk lo va shilai kha chuanin class teacher director approach kha kan ti thin don nia okay, please turn on your videos. I'm going to take attendance. Yes. Roll number 1, 2, okay, 3,
Present, Miss. 3.
4,
Present, Miss.
4, okay, 5,
Present Miss, roll number 5.
6,
Present Miss, roll number 6.
7, 8,